it's already 5 o'clock. And I guess, yes, it's a really hot day, right? I know. Here is really hot too. Here in Acapulco is really, really hot. Well, today is a beautiful afternoon, hot and beautiful. But we are starting. It's already 5 o'clock. We're starting. Hopefully, in the time we are starting, more people join us. Last time they were like 12. If not, as you guys remember, this class is recorded and the link is shared to you by mail right after the event, after the class. So we are working on two skills. These skills are reading and writing. Hello, Fernando. Hello. Reading and writing. Last class, we were talking about reading, right? We were talking about reading. We said reading, it's a receptive skills. You didn't get the books. That's weird. I sent them to this lady, Nicte, who is the one supposed to send you the material. I'm just going to remind her about you. You are ever. Let me see. I'm texting her. Give me a second. Give me a second, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm not going to take that much. Okay, I already sent her a message. Okay, Fernando says that he was told that you will receive them today. Okay, so thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Fernando. Okay, all right, let's get going. As I was saying, the previous class, we were talking about reading. We said that reading is a receptive skills. This involves making sense of written words, right? We said that in order for us to teach reading, we need to know not only reading, but we need to know all the sub skills that reading implies. We mentioned that some of the sub skills that are implied in reading are scanning, which is when you go over a text quickly so you can find specific information. Another one is skimming, which is reading the first and last line of each paragraph in order to understand the general idea. Another sub skill is called reading for detail. That is when you read every single word in order to understand every single detail about the text. We also have inferring attitude, which means that you read and you understand the point of view of the author. You understand the feeling, the emotions, the mood behind that article. We also can make some extensive reading. That is when you read something for pleasure in order to practice your language, to increase your vocabulary, to increase your understanding. But we can also make some intensive reading. That is when you read something about a specific topic in order to practice a specific structures or a specific vocabulary. We also said that when reading, we can practice other soft skills like predicting. That means that you see the title, the subtitles, the images, and you predict what the reading is going to be about. Or guessing meaning from context. That is that if you don't know a word, you try to guess the meanings from the word around it. All right, we said that all these sub skills are present in our daily life, and that it is important to motivate our students to transfer the skills they are using to the classroom, the skills they are using outside to the classroom. So that's practically what we were talking about last class, and today we're going to start with another skill in language, that is writing. Writing. So writing, differently from reading, writing is productive. Reading is receptive. Writing is productive. That means it involves producing the language rather than receiving it. To write, we need a message to communicate. And we also need to be able to form letters and words and join them into sentences, right? So we said that when we write, the most important is that we need a message to communicate, right? If you don't have a message to communicate, you cannot communicate anything. For example, are you ever and Fernando teachers? Are you teachers? Yes, no? Yes. Okay. So, I bet, right, that probably after a vacation, after holiday, sometimes you get to the classroom, right? And one common homework we give our students, or one common task we give our students is that we tell them, okay, what did you do on your vacation? And the students say, oh, I did this, I did that, I did that. Okay, perfect. And now we sometimes tell the students, now write on your notebooks, write about your holiday. Okay, yes. For example, ever says that he tells them to write, right? So you tell them, write on your notebooks what you did on your vacations, right? And you tell them, write. Write it, okay? Write a paragraph, right? 50 words, right? And there is always in the classroom this fulanito, right? We always have this fulanito, right? And this fulanito is always this type of a student who says, "Ah, teacher, I didn't do anything on my vacation. I didn't do anything. I don't know what to write, teacher." And you tell them, "You certainly do something. You certainly did something. You need to write something. You ate something. You probably played something. Probably you visited somebody. Write it." And he says, "No, teacher. I was bored. I was bored. I didn't do anything. It was a very boring holiday." And you say, come on, you can write something. "No, teacher, I don't know what to write." So you always have those fulanitos, right, in the class, right? And it's difficult because they don't know how to develop the message. So if they don't have a message, it's difficult that our students write something, because if they think they don't have anything to write, well, what can they do? What can they write, right? So message is the most important. The message is the most important. So I'm going to show you right now in a little bit. Just let me finish something. I'm going to show you how we can help our students to develop this message. Writing involves several soft skills. For example, accuracy. What does accuracy mean? Accuracy means using the correct form of the language. Writing accurately involves spelling correctly, forming letters correctly, punctuating correctly, right? So there are soft skills. The first soft skills that we have here mentioned is accuracy, right? That means that that the language used in the text is okay. It has good spelling. It has good punctuation. It has good grammar. It has a correct use of vocabulary. And another soft skill is communication. Communicating a message successfully to others. That means that we can express our ideas in the right sequence, and the people who reads it understand it, right? The people who reads it understand it, make sense of it. Our ideas are coherent, right? So you remember that previously, last class, we were talking about coherency and cohesion, right? So when we talk about accuracy, we talk about cohesion. And we talk about communication, we talk about coherency, right? So we need to write something, and what we write needs to be coherent and needs to be cohesive, right? So it needs to be accurate and needs to develop the message. The message needs to be clear. How can we make the message clear? How can we make the message clear? Well, let's think about grocery shopping. Do you guys? Oh, we have more people here. We have Ingrid, we have Lilia, we have Nazaria. Good afternoon, ladies. Okay, do you, ladies and gentlemen, do you guys usually, do you guys like or do you guys usually go grocery shopping? Do you guys go grocery shopping? All the time, from time to time. Now I am the only one who goes grocery shopping. All right. Okay. Nobody goes with you. Yeah, it's okay. They need to be careful. When you guys go grocery shopping, go grocery shopping, do you guys write a shopping list? Sometimes, yes. Okay, what happens? What happens if you don't write your shopping list? Did you forget something? You buy more stuff than needed. You buy a lot of things, right? And then you realize, oh my goodness, I was not coming from this. Oh, you forget the things you needed, right? Okay, perfect. So it is a good idea to write a grocery shopping. Okay, you want to buy everything. You're right without the stuff. I know. Okay, so imagine that you guys are going to go grocery shopping, right? So imagine you're going to go grocery shopping today. So what is the first thing you do before going grocery shopping? The first thing, you're going to start writing your shopping list, but the first thing, you pick up paper, you pick up pen, and what's the first thing you do to start before? Yes, you do a checklist, right? But before the checklist, what do you do? How do you start? Yes, Lilia, exactly. You need to check the things you have and the things you need, right? So you probably open the fridge, probably you open the refrigerator, right? And you check there and you open it and you see and you say, oh my goodness, I guess I need more milk. I guess I need more tomatoes. I guess I need more bananas. I guess I need more cheese or ketchup or something. Oh my goodness. I only have 2 eggs. Tomorrow I will need to buy some eggs, right? So what do you do? What you do is that you start checking everything, and this process where you start getting ideas about everything you need is called brainstorming. Mhm. Brainstorming, right? So you start brainstorming, right? So you start brainstorming all the things you need, right? You start brainstorming all the things you need. You start checking everything you have, everything you need. You start brainstorming. That's the first stage, right? Then after you mention 5 or 4 things, you think, oh, you know what? These are too many things. These are too many things. You say cheese, ketchup, tomatoes, avocados, onions, uh, eggs, milk, chicken. These are too many things. You say, you know what? I'm going to forget. I'm going to forget, and I don't want to forget, because if I forget, then everybody's going to get mad at me. So I don't want to forget. So what do you do? If you don't want to forget, what do you do? Yes, you make a list, right? You make a list. You start writing. You start making notes, right? So you start note taking, right? Or making notes, right? That's what you do, right? You start note taking, or you start making notes, right? So you start making notes. You start making notes like, okay, eggs, tomatoes, cheese, milk, ketchup, blah, 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 right? And then you say, okay, I got all the things I need. Now, how many do I need? How much do I need? All right. And then you start checking, like, okay, I need a gallon of milk. I need a dozen eggs. I need a kilo of tomatoes. I need this. I need that. So how's it called? How could you call that? You start. We call that planning. You start planning, right? You start planning the things you need. Okay, I'm going to buy this much of this, ta 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 ta. But then what happens? Then what happens? Well, it happens that you check your budget, right? You check your budget like, oh my goodness, but I only have, I don't know, 500 pesos. And this is a long list. It's not gonna be enough. It's not gonna be enough. It's too many things to buy, and I only have 500 pesos. It's not gonna be enough. So what do? You start editing, right? You start editing. You say, you know what? I probably, right? Don't need those many tomatoes. I probably don't need those many eggs. I probably don't need those many I don't know onions, right? And you say, but I can survive with 1 liter of milk, right? And you adapt it, right? You adapt it. Then you finish it, right? You edit it, and then you say, okay, I want to check that everything is all right. So what do? I proofread it. I proofread it, right? So you read it again, right? You got your list, you edit it, and then you read it again to be sure that you are not forgetting anything. Nazaria says she prioritizes, right? She says, oh, no, I need this probably I don't, and you erase it, right? So you proofread it, that you are not missing anything that is priority, right? That you are not missing anything that is extremely necessary, like the toilet paper, or I don't know, something like that. And then you proofread it, and probably you are missing something else. Probably you're missing something else. You say like, oh my goodness, I forgot. Yes, I need more shampoo, because the shampoo is not in the cabinet. You forgot to add it. So you say, oh, I need more shampoo. And you add the shampoo. Oh, I also need more fabuloso. And you add the fabuloso. Oh, I need some hand sanitizer. And you add the hand sanitizer. So what do? You edit it again, right? You edit it again. You add more things. You erase other things. And when you finish editing, this time you have a second version of your list, and this is called a second draft. In the beginning, when you write it the first time, that is called a first draft. But now that you did it, this is called a second draft. Let me make some space to write here first draft because I didn't write it. So you produce a second draft with all of the ideas that you are adding, right? First draft. Okay. And then you want to be sure that now is correct. You want to be sure that now you're not forgetting anything and that now everything is perfect. And you proofread it again. And you proofread it again to check that everything is cool, that you're not forgetting anything. Mhm. And finally, if everything is perfect, you go and you buy it. Mhm. So all of these stages that we follow to produce our shopping list, all of these stages that I just mentioned are called the creative process. That's how they are called. The creative process. All the writers, the I don't know, journalists, right? The movie directors, right? The producers, right? All of these people who is involved in create content, right? For audiences, it's not that they just sit down and they start writing things. No, they all need to follow a creative process. If they want to write a book, there are some techniques that they use to write a book, some strategies that they use, some stages that they follow in order to write a book. If they want to write a movie, it's the same. If they want to write a play, it's the same. They follow stages, they follow steps, right? They go through many different techniques and then they produce. They edit it, they cut things, they add things, right? It's not that boom, they write it and boom, it's ready. No, no, no. And all this that they do is called the creative process. The creative process is important so we can develop the message, right? We can develop the message. The message we want to communicate, we develop better when we go through this creative process. Now, this creative process that I wrote here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different stages, but some stages are repeated. What stages are repeated? Who can tell me? Editing, proofreading, and let's see if someone says something. And the drafting, right? Yes. Why? Because you can produce, you are not going to, and this is pretty important because our students believe that when they finish writing something, they write something, and it's not only the students, it's also us as teachers, right? It's what we believe, it's what we think, right? Sometimes our students finish writing something and they say, teacher, here is it. This is my homework. And they get to you with that. And it's not the final work. What they give you is just a draft. Do all of you understand the word draft? Can anyone write it in Spanish? Mm, yes, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Lilia. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, that's the meaning of draft. So the students get to you with a draft and they give it to you, right? And they think, oh, I finished, it's done, right? But it's not done. It's just the first draft. Writers produce many drafts for their books. Journalists produce many drafts for their newspapers. Have you guys written, or when you graduated in a school, did you guys have to write a thesis or a project when you graduated from school? Yes. And how many times were you asked to correct it, to edit it, to renew it? Many times, a lot of times, right? They don't accept it like, oh yes, you finished, thank you very much, yes. Even to start with a different topic out from the scratch, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing, right? Oh, sorry. Yes, that's the thing. Yeah. So it is important that our students understand this too. Okay? Because our students don't understand that. They think, oh, I finished. Boom. No, that what was it. I forget. And who edits? Who edits? Who checks the mistakes? Who finds the mistakes? The teacher. Who corrects the mistakes? The teacher, right? The teacher corrects the mistakes. The teacher finds the mistakes. The teacher does all the editing. The teacher does all the editing. The students do from here to here. Sometimes they don't even do that. They only go to the draft. And the teacher does this, right? The teacher does this, right? So the teacher finishes, the teacher edits it, and the teacher gives the draft corrected with the mistakes to the student. And what do the students do? They do it. They produce the second draft. The majority of the times, the students take their homework, and they see it, and they say, oh, okay, thank you. And they put it away, right? Sometimes they don't even read the mistakes. Sometimes they don't even check their mistakes. Sometimes you spend the whole night checking everything, correcting everything. Sometimes you spend the whole night to give them a score. And when you give it back, sometimes the students just see it like, oh, oh, I have a 9. Oh, I have an 8, a 7. Oh, okay. Thank you, teacher. And that's it, right? And it doesn't work the students to improve. It doesn't work the students to improve. It is important that we can. Do you remember what I told you about reading? I told you in reading that it is important that we train our students, right, in new strategies for reading. So whenever they get to international exams, to standardized exams, they can have these strategies and they can have better results. The same for writing. The same for grading, right? The same for grading. Sometimes the students get to take a Cambridge certification, a TOEFL IBT, and IELTS, and it gets to grading, and they don't know how to grade, and they don't know how to do it, and they don't get good results because they don't have the strategy. So it's important that we train them. It's important that we also train them to identify mistakes. So let's check this out. Okay? So, as I said, writing involves going through a number of stages. First of all, we have brainstorming. So let's imagine that this is not a shopping list. I'm sorry. Let's imagine that it's not a shopping list. Let's imagine that instead of a shopping list, we're going to write an essay, right? An essay. And you're going to write an essay about public transportation. It's just an example. We're not going to write the essay. Imagine it's your students. Public transportation. So you tell your students, guys, today we're going to write an essay about public transportation. So it is important that we help our students we guide them through the different stages. So the first one, because sometimes the book says, oh, write an essay about public transportation, 100 words, and that's it. And the students are like, what do I do? Right? So the first thing that we tell our students, okay, we're going to write this essay. So the first thing we have to do is brainstorming. Okay, you guys do it. You guys who are here, you teachers, help me. Help me brainstorming. What ideas? What can we say about public transportation? What can we say? Okay. Let me write it here. We're gonna add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 things. Okay. First of all, we have ever says benefits. Benefits from the public transportation. Problems. Problems caused by the public transportation. Roads. Routes. Roads. Fernando says roads. Characteristics. My goodness, cannot see the characteristics. Let me a second. All right. Someone else said usefulness. 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 Okay, they said they need to be updated. Types, we can say like types of vehicles, right? They are necessary. Necessities. We can say that necessities. And in that, we can involve everything. Necessities. Good. And types. Excellent. With those is enough. Types. Good job. Okay. So we have 7 different things about the public transportation. So when you started brainstorming, and at the same time you were brainstorming, I was note taking. Okay. So here we cover the first 2 stages: brainstorming, making notes. Okay. So brainstorming, we think about everything we can. We think of everything we can about a topic and make notes. Well, start making notes. Now we go to planning. We need to organize our ideas. Okay. So how do we organize our ideas? Well, organizing our ideas involves that we need to think where to start and where to finish. For example, we can say, okay, we're going to start with the types of public transportation. We can say, you know what? Why don't we start with the types of public transportation? So we say, okay, public transportation. We have different types of public transportation. We have the taxis. We have the buses, the subways. We can say then we can talk about the roads. We can say they cover the majority of the city, right? They cover the most crowded roads are this. Then we can say some characteristics. They charge this much. This is the most expensive. This is the cheapest, etc. We can say the usefulness or the benefits. We can decide. We can say, well, we're going to talk about the benefits. We're going to skip the usefulness. So we say the benefits are they are cheap. We can save gas. And it's good because of the environment. We can take care of the environment. But then we can say some problems. And then we can say some necessities. And then we can give a conclusion. Now, what it is important, and it is not mentioned in this presentation, but I'm going to write it here right now, is that also in planning, a part of planning, an important part about planning is that we need to identify, right? We need to identify the type of text we are asked to write. Different types of text have different layouts. Mhm. Mhm. A layout is a format, right? A layout is a format, right? For example, an essay, right? An essay. When you write an essay, you usually have an introduction paragraph where you set the scene. Then you have a body, right, where you give your main ideas, and then you have a conclusion, right? When you write a letter, right, letter, usually, how do letters start? What is the first thing? Before the greeting. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to Ever and Lilia. When it is a letter, right, differently from an email, because in the email you don't need it because the email already have it, right? But the letter doesn't have it. In the letter you need to include the date. It's very important. It's the first thing. When it's letter, you need to have the date. The first thing, boom, Acapulco Guerrero, right? April 7th, right? Then, after the date, yes, as of some of you mentioned, well, you will go for the greeting, right? Then you will have the greeting, right? And then, well, you start your letter, right? The body of the letter, where you give all the message. And then, how do you close your letter usually? How did you close your letter? With your name. You close with a farewell, right? A farewell. Mhm. And then with your signature, right? Or your name. So you say you give a farewell like, well, hope to hear from you soon. Regards, Mario Chavez, right? Or whatever. Mhm. Or hoping to read your answer whenever it is possible, right? Have a great afternoon. Sincerely, Mario Chavez, right? Of course, another part that is really important, as Mr. Fernando, Fernando, Fernando mentioned, it's the register. Mhm. The register of the letter, the register of everything you write. Because different register implies using different vocabulary. Register means the level of formality, right? Register is the level of formality. Mhm. So whether the letter is formal, informal, or neutral. If it is formal, then you're going to use more formal language. If it is informal, it's to a friend, well, your language would be more informal. So depending on the level of formality is the language, the vocabulary you're going to use. So these are two things that you need to consider when planning, right? The layout, which is the organization of the text, the format of the text, and the register, which is the level of formality, right? If it is a dialogue, well, the dialogue will be different than a letter. If it is an email, well, it will not have a date, right? If it is an email, probably you will write something like, please confirm you have received this email, right? If it is an article, well, then you would need, as in the essay, introduction, body, conclusion, right? Whether you have any doubts. Yes, 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 yes. In the email, probably you write, if you have any doubts or for comments, please contact me to this email. Okay. So these are two important things to consider. Okay. We have opening and closing remarks in letters. Yes, yes. You have certainly specific, right, remarks for opening and closing letters. Okay. So you brainstorm, you make notes, you plan, and then or your students make like brainstorm your students brainstorm, make notes, plan, consider the layout, consider the register, and then once they do all this, they are ready to start writing. They are ready to start writing, but they need all this information and they need to do this so they can write better, they can develop their message better. Usually what happens when you tell your students, hey guys, you're going to write, for example, let's say, you guys are going to write these many words. Now, this is important. When you give a writing assessment, you do not, or a writing task, you do not assign the task in terms of lines. You do not assign the task in terms of cheats. How do you assign the task? What do you tell your students? You're going to write 20 lines, 2 cheats, 5 paragraphs. What do you tell your students? Paragraphs. Excellent, Ever. Good job. Usually, the most common is that you tell your students to write a certain number of words. Yes, words. Yes. Because if you tell them lines, right, what do? They write one line, one blank, another line, another blank. Right? Or they write big letters, right? Oh my goodness. And then that's what they do, right? Big spaces in between them. Yes. So usually, instead of doing that, what you do is that you assign it by words, right? Standardized examinations and international examinations are always focused on the words. Usually, I said, usually, that never happened to you. You're lucky, Fernando. I am amazed about your students. You have very honest students. In my 16 years of teaching, it has happened to me like uncountable times. All right. So for A1 students, A1 is the lowest level, the most basic students, right? So for A1 students, usually you would ask them to write in between 20 to 40 words. Mhm. In between 20 to 40 words for the A1 level, for the A1 students, right? Mhm. These are the students who are at basic level. For the A2 students, this is upper basic. Mhm. You would ask them to write in between 50, in between 50 to 80 words. Mhm. Mhm. Now, another thing that is important, one more time, I have to be very, I have to insist on this, right? Very punctual on this. Nowadays, probably you are working in an elementary school, middle school, high school, right? Probably your school doesn't have international examinations, but certainly one day your student, sooner or later, will have to take an international examination. And if you follow these standards, you are training your students for international examinations, right? And that is pretty important. Nowadays, we all want to have an international examination, an international certificate. For B1 level students, you would ask them to write in between 80 words to 100 and 20 words, most likely. Mhm. For the B2 level students, this is upper intermediate. This is like you, teachers, and me. We should be able to write in between 120 and 200 words easily. We shouldn't have problems to write 200 words, even more, right? And for C1 level, mhm, your student should be able to write in between 200, mhm, and 280 words. And for the C2 level, your student should be able to write in between 280 and 350 words easily, with not a problem. Mhm. So this is the number of words that you should consider for your students according to their level. Of course, if it is a very, very basic level, well, you tell them 20 words, right? But with the time, you increase it 25, 30, 35, 40, right? A2, 50, 55, 60. So B1, 80, 85, blah, blah. B2, C1, C2, right? And until they are able to write 280, 350 with not a problem. Okay? And it's also for you, right, to know what to expect in a CAE, in an FCE. Usually you are asked to write 300 words, 350, right? Usually, right? Okay, so you give all the directions to your students about the words, the layout, the register, right? They plan it, and now they are ready to begin with the draft. They start writing a draft. But you need to be very consistent. You need to tell them it's a draft, everyone. It's a draft. We are going to produce the first draft, not the final work. This is the first draft. Uh, I have a problem with my students because I always tell them that. I always tell them it's a draft, guys. Okay, this is the first draft. Keep that in mind. And then I give them back and I tell them, okay, write it again. And they say, do I have to write it again? Yes. The other was a draft. Okay, so they start producing the first draft. They finish their first draft, And usually, this is what I recommend. I recommend a lot that when they finish writing their first draft, what you do is that you don't check it. They finish, they have it, but you don't check it. What do you do then? Uh, what you do is that instead of you editing it, instead of you correcting it, instead of you marking the mistakes, you can ask them to work together with some peer correction. Mhm. Why peer correction? Why peer correction? Because when you work on peer correction, the students are training their skills to identify mistakes. Has it happened to you that you sometimes give the students, right, and you tell the students, okay, correct it. You tell the students, you have many mistakes, correct it. And you give it to them, right? And the students look at it and they say, no, I don't see any mistake, teacher, right? Has it happened to you? Or in the exam, no? You tell your students in the exam, Fulanito, you have like 3 or 4 mistakes in this part. Correct it. And they say, teacher, I don't see the mistake. Where is it, right? And it happens to us too as teachers. In Spanish, in English, it happens. Why? Because you know what you want to say. You know what you want to say. And sometimes you read it once, twice, 3 times. And since you know what you want to say, you don't find a mistake because you say, well, but this is correct. But it's not that it's correct. It's that your mind reads it correctly because it's what you want to say. But when someone else reads it, that person can identify the mistake easily or easier than you. And this also helps the students to train their ability to identify mistakes. So they can identify mistakes faster and easier. Fernando says the students write fast and they don't read it again. And that's why, well, in a little bit we're gonna talk about that Fernando is saying. But yes, so this way, with the peer correction, your students start training on finding mistakes. So they can find mistakes. So they can identify the mistakes. So you are helping them to identify mistakes easier. You are helping them to check grammar. And at the same time, you are training them to identify their own mistakes. Now, it is very important uh, to remember that in the case of productive skills, remember, are writing and speaking. Productive skills cannot be assessed the way receptive skills are assessed. Do you understand assessed? Do you understand assessment? Let me write it here. Assessment. Do you understand that word? Assessment. Assessment. I guess I have an extra T. Sorry, and let me correct it. I have an extra T. It should say only assessment. Oh, there you go. Assessment. Yes, no, it's not asesoría. It's, thank you, Weber. It is evaluation. Assessment means evaluation. Okay? So, you cannot assess, you cannot evaluate, right? Writing and speaking the way you evaluate reading and listening. How do you evaluate reading and listening? Well, you have different listening tasks, matching, answering, true or false, filling the gaps. But in writing and speaking, you don't do that. What do you have to do in writing and speaking? Oh, in writing and speaking, you need to develop a rubric. You need to have a rubric. This rubric consists of different things that you are going to evaluate in the grading. For example, I'm going to show you the one I use. Yes, Fernando says right here, punctuation. It's that I had it open and I closed it. Sorry, but I have it here. For example, this is the one I use, and it has even some scores from some of my students. Fernando says punctuation, grammar. A rubric consists on all of this that Fernando mentions, but more than that, it consists of descriptors, right? What does it mean, right? How does it work, right? There you go. For example, here in my assessment sheet for my students, right, I evaluate my students from 1 to 100, right, and these are the different things that I consider the grammar, I consider the spelling, it's missing an A in grammar, punctuation, appropriacy, message, number of words, right? And I tell them, okay, guys, well, this means grammar, this means spelling. Grammar is that the structure sentences properly, uses the correct words, the students spell words, the students use punctuation symbols, the level of formality is right, the students can express coherent and clear message, etc. This is my rubric. This is what I do. It's personal. I didn't copy this from anywhere. You can develop your own rubric. You don't need to copy my rubric. You can think, okay, what am I going to consider? How am I going to evaluate it, right? And you can decide. Sometimes the books have their own rubrics, and it's okay, right? If the books has its own rubric, you can follow it. And based on this, you can. You mind? No, I don't mind. I can send it to you. No problem. I will send it to you. Not a problem for me. Okay, and based on that, you create a correction code. This is called correction code. This is the one I used to. Code. Uh-huh. Your students need to know this correction code. Your students need to know it, right? They need to know it. They need to use it. They need to be used to it, right? For example, my correction code is with colors, right? You can use other things. You can use shapes like circle, rectangle, triangle, a flower, a star. It's okay, right? That's not a problem. Underline, parentheses, all of that is perfect. So the important thing is that you have a correction code for writing, and that your students understand this correction code, and that your students know it and use it. So you tell your students, okay, now using the correction code, fulanito, you check perenganito's work. Perenganito, you check menganito's work. And then they change it and they check it. And what do? They use the correction code to mark the mistakes that they think the other has, right? And they finish with something like this, right? They mark the mistakes. Okay, I think here you have this, ta 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 ta, boom. And then they mark the mistakes. And they give back the work to the other student. And the other student see this. And he knows that yellow, where is yellow, means missing ing or two. Red means wrong word. Purple means spelling mistake. So he says, oh, here is a spelling mistake. It's cell phone. It's together. It's not separate. This word is wrong. What should it be? And he thinks, this word, this, that. Okay. So they use it to correct each other. So the important thing here is that even though you correct it or someone else or another student corrects it, it's not to rewrite it. It's not to rewrite it correctly. No, it's just to point out the mistakes. So the student, the author, can identify the mistake by by herself and correct it, right? And rewrite it properly. That's the most important. Okay? Are we okay until here? Any doubts until here? This is important because whenever they are in international exams, in standardized exams, certifications, they can identify the mistakes easily by themselves. Here they will point some mistakes. What do you mean, Fernando? What is the mistakes are not wrong? That is a good question. That is a good question. But here it comes that you need to remember that this is not the end of the process. This is not the end of the process. So far, we are here. So far, we are here, right? We did brainstorming. We did making notes, planning the draft, writing draft, and then here editing. So they are on this editing, which is peer correction, and then they they give back their work to the owner, and then the owner, right, the author, the students who wrote it can say, no, I don't see any mistake. This is not right. The student can say that and can say, I don't think this is wrong, and can leave it like that. The student can leave it like that. That's not a problem. The student can correct it if it is wrong. But what I usually tell my students, I usually don't grade. I usually don't give scores in the first draft. I'm sorry. I usually don't give scores neither on the first draft, neither on the second draft. I usually give scores until the third draft. That's my case. I'm not telling you to do the same, but like I consider that if better if you like tell your student, because if you give the score in the first draft, the students don't see a need to rewrite it again, right? So it's better in my case, it's better when I give scores until the third draft, so my students don't get the score, don't get the grade until they correct it by the third time. Okay, so but this is my idea. So they finish it, they give it now to the teacher. They produce another draft with these mistakes, and before they give it to the teacher, they need to proofread it. Do you understand proofread it? Before they give it to the teacher, they need to proofread it. Do you understand proofreading? Who can give me the word in Spanish? Yes, as Fernando said, this first is just like an idea, but who can tell me? Proofreading, nobody? Proofreading is like, oh, someone is writing. In Spanish, don't remember. No problem. Let's see if Angeli Diaz knows. I guess Angeli is writing something. Yes, thank you, Angeli. Yes, Nazaria is more like a lectura de prueba, right? Lectura de prueba, right? So they make a proofreading, right? To check that everything is okay, that they didn't skip any mistakes, that everything is all right, and then now they give it to the teacher. And what does the teacher do? Using the same correction code, the teacher now marks the mistake the teacher thinks the students have. Mhm. Yes, lectura de pruebas, we said. And then the teacher gives this back to the student. And the student produce a third draft. So the first draft was the first time the student wrote it. The second draft was when the student corrected based on the opinion of the other student, of his peer. And the third draft, the student corrected with the feedback of the teacher. Right? Sometimes the second draft is okay, but sometimes not. So it depends, right? So the students produce as a third draft, the students one more time do a proofreading, and then the student give it to the teacher. And that is the time when I recommend you can give a score, right? So if you do this, you are training your students to identify their mistakes, to proofread, to follow the creative process, which is very, very important. Okay? So far, so good? Doubts, questions until here? Everything is fine. Sounds really good. No questions. Excellent. Okay. Now, since writing has different sub skills, right, we can call that these are some of the most common mistakes that our students make, right? For example, some of the most common mistakes are on spelling, on using words not appropriately, punctuation, verb pattern. I don't write verb pattern because sometimes the students don't understand that. Sometimes you don't understand what the student is saying. The problem is on countable, uncountables. They write something countable in plural. Sorry, they write something uncountable in plural while it needs to be singular. Appropriacy, the register. Sometimes they repeat words many times. Sometimes the message is not clear. So you need to focus. It is impossible, right, that the students focus on everything at the same time. So something that is very important is that in different activities, in different tasks, you focus on different types or on different needs, right, for your students, right? For example, something that can help your students a lot besides the register and the layout that we previously talked, the register and the layout here, something that also can help your students a lot improve their writing is the use of cohesive devices. The use of cohesive devices, right? The use of cohesive devices. We also call cohesive devices conjunctions or connectors, right? Sometimes the students are very repetitive on their conjunctions or connector, or sometimes the students don't write or don't use conjunctions or connectors at all, right? Sometimes the students, you tell the students, teacher, this guys, please write a sentence. Yeah, they get stick to the basic. They write a sentence the about your vacations, right? About your holidays, and your students write something like, "I went." I went. I'm writing. That's why I'm thinking a little bit. And give me a second. I played. I didn't go anywhere. I Okay, your students write something like this. And they say, I went to the beach, I played video games, I didn't go anywhere, I checked Facebook. Now, is this a paragraph? Yes, they write sentences, they write only this. Is this a paragraph? No, it's not a paragraph. These are, as Nazaria said, these are only sentences. They are only ideas, but it's not a paragraph. What is missing to this in order to become a paragraph? Yes, it's missing the connectors. It's missing the cohesive devices, the conjunctions, right? For example, in these ideas are all related to the same topics. So in this case, what type of connectors, what type of conjunctions can we use to link these ideas? Give me examples. And sequence in this case. Okay, but however, none the least, probably not, because those are contrast. We have different types, first, then, after. For example, first, then, after are sequencing connections. Later, next, sequencing connections. They is to mention the sequence, and is to add information. But, however, is more to make contrast, right? So, depending on the type of information that I want to link, right? Depending on the type of information that I want to link, I didn't go anywhere. Yes, yes. No, well, in your example, it sounds good. Is the type of connectors that I can use. For example, here we have some different types of connectors. We have sequencing connectors like first of all, firstly, secondly, next, then, finally. Cause and effects like because, so, therefore, consequently, for this reason, comparing connectors similarly in the same way, equally, like adding, like and, so, moreover, additionally, as well, to, furthermore, where contrasting, like whereas, while, on the other hand, instead of, though, otherwise, emphasizing, like especially, indeed, above all, in particular, significantly, qualifying, like but, however, if, unless, as long as, although, apart from. uh, some connectors can be from more than one type. Like but is qualifying, but it can be also contrast. However, it can be also contrast, right? Although can be also contrast, even though. Illustrating, like for example, for instance, such as in the case of. So these are some types of connectors. There are many more types of connectors, right? Many more types of connectors. So from every now and then, it's good that when you're working on a specific grading task, you focus your attention, or you focus the attention on your student on a specific type of writing or a specific issue of writing. For example, okay, guys, today we're going to work on this and we're going to focus on the layout. And then focus on the register. And then focus on the connectors. And then focus on the punctuation. It is important that you vary the focus, right? So your students can pay attention to different things at a time. And that way they can write better. Okay? For example, mhm, for example, here, mhm, here, mhm, Especially hate is where there's already a text and they have to find a number of mistakes. You, the student, especially hate that. Oh my God, it's too bad. Okay, for example, we have here this example. It's just an example. Look at this example. Here we have a common sequence of a grading class. A common sequence of a grading class. Now, usually grading usually needs to be linked, or it's not that it needs to, but it's better if it is, right? It's better if it is, right? Usually grading, it is linked to a reading or an audio. Do you know why? Yes, Ever. Thank you very much. Last class, I mentioned mhm, that in order to develop the skills with our students, there is a specific method that talks about this, and is the skills based method, right? I previously I told you in the previous class that this methodology, as any methodology, follow a sequence of steps, right? And this skills-based method starts with what? Starts with the introductory activity. And the introductory activity can be many of the times a lead-in. And the lead-in is to set, as Ever said, the context. To set the context, right? So when we have a reading or we have a listening before the writing, that is the lead-in. It's in order to set the context. It's in order that the students get to think about that, right? So the students are more like, oh, we're going to talk about that. Oh, I need to write about that. Okay. Then after the lead in, right, we have some pre-teaching, right? In the pre-teaching, usually we pre-teach in reading. I told you that we pre-teach some vocabulary, right? In the case of writing, well, probably we're not going to pre-teach some vocabulary, but what we're going to do is to pay closer attention to the use of connectors, to the layout, to the register, or to the punctuation. For example, mhm, in this activity, in this book, previously, the previous page was this reading, mhm, which was about digital dirt. This reading is the reading we did previously last class. Hopefully you remember. And then they move on and they have this. And they have uh, writing, making judgments. Should employer judge applicants by their online profile? So as you can see, what the students need to write is related to what they previously read, right? And then it has read the questions above. Write 2 reasons to answer yes and 3 reasons to answer no. Who can tell me what part of the creative process is this? Oh, it's right here. Yeah, don't tell me it's right here. I didn't see it. Sorry. So they start brainstorming, right? Because it's the first part, right? And they make the notes because they write the sentences, right? And then it says, look at the model. Why does it have look at the model? Why do many writings have look at the model? Who knows? To exemplify exactly the kind of text. To give an example of, to give an example of the layout, right? So the gift to give like these activities where it says look at the model or look at this later or something like that is so the students can have an example of the layout. What is the layout for this? Okay. And also in the model, they can see an example of the register, right? So this is pretty important. You see how everything is linked. You see how all the ideas are together, right? And then it says, look at the example, circle the three expressions that contrast ideas, right? Can you please read the paragraph and tell me the three examples, the three extra expressions that are being used to contrast ideas? Read it, please, and tell me what other three expressions are used to contrast ideas. On the other hand, well, on the one hand, we have, and then we have on the other hand. Thank you. We also have whereas. Thank you. It's missing one. We have whereas, we have on the other hand, and we have what else? It's missing one. I'm going to circle them. Well, I'm going to underline them. On the other hand, whereas. Thank you. Yes. While. Sorry, no, for example, and for this reason, no. When we talk about for example and for this reason, they are illustrating connectors and we're looking for contrasting connectors. Oh my goodness, what did I do? Contrasting, that in this case is whereas, while, on the other hand. Thank you. Where is it? Oh, I went back here. While. So these three expressions are used, right, to contrast ideas. So after that, we have this activity that says contrast ideas in writing. On the one hand, employers need workers, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, an online profile needs blah, blah, blah. And it says, read the grammar charts and then user ideas, right? And in this grammar chart, you can see the way they are being used. For example, when we use on the one hand, we use on the one hand at the beginning. And what can you see after on the one hand? What can you see? A comma. Yes. So here we are using comma after on the one hand, comma after on the other hand. So when they are being used at the beginning, they need to have a comma, right? Look at however. How, like on the one hand and on the other hand are using the first and the second ideas. We are contrasting these ideas. However is used on the second idea. We use it at the beginning of the sentence and we also use a comma, right? With on the one hand, on the other hand, and however we use a comma. But look at while. While doesn't need a comma. We don't need a comma with while. Not even if it is at the beginning. But when we use while, whereas, but, we use it in the middle. We can use while in the middle and in the beginning. But we cannot use whereas at the beginning. You can, but it's not correct. Okay? So usually you use it in the middle, in the second sentence. And when you use it in the middle, before this, you have a comma, right? Before. When you use it at the beginning, you have it after. But when you use it in the middle, you have it before. When you use while at the beginning, you have while, no comma, but you have a comma in the middle to separate the ideas. And you teach this to your students. What are you doing here? Oh, what you are doing here and here is that you are pre-teaching. You are pre-teaching, right? Pre-teaching the use of connectors, the layout, the register, right? You see? Then what do you do after that? Well, now you have the task. What is the task? That the students start writing and they start producing their draft. Then they do the editing, peer correction. They use the correction code. They proofread it. Now they change the mistakes. Now they give it to you. Now you check it. You use the correction code. You give it back. The students edit it. The students proofread and they give it to you. And now you check it and you give a score, right? And then you finish. And when you finish, what you do is a post-task activity. What is a post-task activity? Well, what about you? Now you take this to the real life. You take this to the real life. For example, here they're talking about the online profile. Here, for example, the idea is now write your own script. This is the task. Write and check. But here they are writing about employers or job applicants who judge the applicants by their profile. You can tell. Has it happened to you? Has any of the companies where you have worked, have they asked you for your Facebook? Have they checked your online profile? Talk to a partner. Who has? Who hasn't? Right? Would you do it if you were part of human sources? If you were a recruiter? That is a post task, right? Where you take the activity to the real life and then you finish, right? So in the task, you do all the writing, all the editing, the proofreading, and then you do the post task. It is only these 4 stages: lead in, pre-teach, task, post task, right? So these are the skills-based method. These are the stages of your class, but these are the stages that the students follow in order to produce the task. You see? How are we going? Are we going okay? Yes? You're following me? Yes? Aha. Hopefully. Okay, we are almost done. We are almost done. Yes, we are almost done. Today we had a lot of participation from Ever and Fernando, right? Thank you, Ever and Fernando. Lilia, I haven't heard a lot from Ingrid, for example, but Lazaria has been participative too. Daniel too. Yes. Okay. All right. Key concepts about writing. You're almost finished. When we teach writing, we need to focus on both accuracy and building up communication, right? When you follow this creative process, the focus is developing the message. When you focus on this correction code, the focus is accuracy. So you need to have a balance. You need to develop the message, but you also need to be accurate, right? So you use them so your students can have both, okay? By encouraging learners to use the writing process in the classroom, we help them to be creative and to develop their message. Other soft skill, sorry, it is important for the students to learn how to use different types of layouts for different types of text. It's not like we write everything the same way. We need to have different types of layouts. Other soft skills to develop are, for example, paraphrasing. That is, paraphrasing is uh, trying to say, right, express the same idea with different words. Sometimes the students don't find the right word. What you can tell them, use other words to express the same idea. Uh, Connectors and conjunctions, like linking devices, like you just mentioned. When correcting our students' written work, it is better to use a correction code for a better editing, right? And the rubrics. I insist. You need to have rubrics, right? You need to tell them, for example, grammar. Probably you don't have from 1 to 100 like me. Probably you have 1 to 5. 1 is very bad. 2 is bad. 3, it's okay. 4, it's very good. 5 is excellent, perfect. So it depends on you. The important thing is that you know the rubric, the students know the rubric, so you can give them a score. I usually tell them, well, it's a 1 to 100. 1 to 20 is bad. 20 to 40 is okay. No, sorry. 1 to 20 is very bad. 20 to 40 is bad. 40 to 60 is okay. 60 to 80 is very good. And 80 to 100 is excellent. Okay, so that's what I usually do. Okay, but it's up to you. Okay, all right. Okay, perfect. And with this, we finished about grading, everyone. Good job, everyone. We're finished. Yeah. Nazaria says yes. Yeah. Okay. But before we go, I know. Let me see. Before we go, I would like you to answer some questions, okay? I would like you to answer some questions so to check what you have understood so far, okay? Well, this is my information. This is my information. This is the address where the school where I work here in Acapulco, English Access Acapulco. This is the address. But I'm going to ask you some questions to check your understanding about the topic. Okay? Ready? Listen up. Mhm. Listen up. These questions are very easy. Number one. Mhm. Okay, someone was writing. I guess he gave up. Number one. Mention. Mhm. Tell me, guys, is writing a receptive or a productive skill? Yes, very good. Writing is productive. Very good. All right. Number two. How do we call how do we call this sub skill that we develop when we write everything correct? When we use the correct grammar, the correct spelling, the correct punctuation. Good, Lilia Ever. The answer is accuracy. Accuracy. Appropriacy is that is appropriate, that is formal, or that is informal. But when you write it correctly with the correct grammar, correct spelling, correct punctuation, it's called accuracy. Excellent. Good job. Mhm. Next. How do we call this stage in the class where you set the scene for the students, you set the context, so the students think about the topic. Yeah, very good. It's called lead in. Very good. Good job. Good job. All right, next. How do we call this part in the creative process where the students start giving ideas? Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, brainstorming. Good job. Good job. How do we call the code that the teacher used to correct the students' written work? Good. We call it the correction code. Okay. Next. How do we as teachers, how do we as teachers evaluate, or what do we use to evaluate our students' work? Yeah, very good, guys. Yeah, we use a rubric. Good job. Okay, we're almost finished. How do we call the words that we use in English, right? The words that we use in English to link ideas. Conjunctions, connectors, cohesive devices. Good job, good job. How do we call the stage in the class after they have finished the task, where you personalize the activity, where you make it personal to the real life? The post task. Good, good. Next. How do we call the stage in the creative process where the students finish writing and they read to check they don't have mistakes? Proofreading. Good job. Good job. How do you call the grading that they do that is not the final grading, but it's just one draft? Very good. Very good. Last question. How do you call it when the students correct their mistakes? Editing. Yes, Fernando. Well, when it is like many students, two students checking is peer correction, but this is editing is when they correct it, right? Excellent job, everyone. Good job. Congratulations. Well, thank you very much for attend the workshops, both of the workshops. Thank you very much. As I previously said, I'm going to tell Nicte to send you the material as soon as possible. Mhm. And before you leave, it is going to be important that thank you, Fernando, thank you, Lilia. It's going to be very important for all of us, right? For all of us, for me, for Nicte, and for all the people who works with us, that you let us know, you're learning. Tell me anything that you have learned in these two workshops. One thing, two things. It can be one word, it can be one strategy, it can be one definition. Tell me something that you learned. That's going to be very important for me to improve my teaching. Thank you, Fernando. That's awesome. The stage is awesome too. Thank you, Nazaria. Better classes. Thank you, Lilia. activity. So check the sub skills, not to take everything. Yes, thank you, Ever. Thank you, Fernando. Sounds really good. The process. Thank you. The methodology to have a better planning. Good job. Thank you, Lilia. You were lost on the methodology. Not a problem. We all get lost. We all get lost at some point. Sub skills learn that they exist. They do exist. The strategies. Thank you, Nazaria. Thank you, everyone. Well, that's all for me. Thank you very much. I am glad that you learned something new. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe. Don't go out. Stay home. And you have there my information. Anything you need, send me a message and I'll be always happy to answer. Okay? Thank you very much to everybody. I guess Nikte will be sending you the material. We are going to have more workshops soon. Nikte will let you know about the same next workshops, and we will send you also the diplomas and the books. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you. Blessings to you, Nazaria, to your family. Take care. Goodbye. Be safe, everyone.